don't often get to dig deep into being Black in the workplace, being a first and an only, how to protect our kids from violence in the school system, or even how to focus on generational well-being over generational wealth. Playwright, producer, writer, and community organizer Amanda Parris is exploring all of these issues off of social media, and she's here to talk about them now. Please welcome Amanda Parris! Love the work you do.
Thank you.
And I know you're busy, so thank you for coming here to hang out with us today. The series that you have produced and put out into the world for the culture is an incredible series. It was a gut punch for me. So many gems dropped. I want to talk about where some of the personal challenges that have come from your life and have been explored throughout this series.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very personal show. I pitched it in 2020, which obviously was a very significant year for all of us. But it was a year where I was really reflecting on how important it was to have conversations with my friends, the group chat, you know, all of these spaces where we talk about all of these things that might be inspired by social media or triggers, but we don't get to go deep in a real way on any of these topics. And so whether it was me and my friends commiserating over trying to find Black hair care businesses, or whether it was us talking about our anxieties around what we're gonna do with our kids in the school system. I was pregnant at the time, and so I was thinking a lot about like the future that my child was gonna live in, the world that they were gonna live in, and I was hungry to be in that world. And so, you know, the show really was birthed out of that. And in making it, you know, I've had a few years of experience doing interviews, but I've never done interviews that felt like we were diving into something that was so urgent. You know, we were talking about things that were so urgently needed to talk about, and getting the gift to sit with people in their homes, in restaurants, eat food with them, being out in the world with them, and to be able to bring all of that to everybody felt really important. But in terms of how it's impacted me, I feel so shifted that I think I need some time off to really absorb all the things that I learned. I love the quote that you pulled because it stayed with me, the generational well-being over generational wealth. When Zoe Smith, who's in our Diaspora Wars episode, said that, I was like, I'm gonna have to take a few months with that one because I feel like it was just such a shift in my overall dynamic, and there were so many conversations that did that for me. So I've actually been taking time off. I just came back from a vacation, and I sat on the beach and just really thought about a lot of the things that I've learned.
I love that.
Yeah.
The processing needs to happen as well.
Yeah.
Like, take it all in and let's see what to do with all this good info. So one of the theories that was explored and explored so well is the glass cliff theory. Have you ever felt on the edge of that cliff? Because I know I certainly have.
Yeah, I mean, so I think a lot of people are familiar with the glass ceiling in the professional world. The glass cliff is like an extension of that theory. It's this idea that for a lot of women and racialized folks in particular who are being appointed into positions of leadership and finally have broken through that glass ceiling, they are often set up for failure because they're not given the resources necessary to succeed. So they're only given that opportunity when that company or institution is in a moment of crisis, when there aren't as many, the funding is a little bit less, but they're expected to produce just as much or even more. And so we wanted to examine this phenomenon, this theory, under the backdrop of 2020, when a lot of Black folks in particular were put into positions of leadership, and see what happened. For me, I feel like as I was doing these interviews and having these conversations with folks, I definitely felt an affinity to this idea in the sense that I've often questioned the intention behind the opportunities that I get, which is something Gayleen Gould in our episode talks about. Why are you giving me this opportunity in this particular moment? Is it only because diversity is the buzzword right now? Are you actually interested in me, in my stories? Will the interest in me die when this fad and this trend dies? Like, I think about it in that kind of context.
Absolutely. And then the whole idea of being elevated into spaces that aren't safe.
Yes.
You know, and a lot of us have been put in those situations.
Yeah.
You are a first and an only. For me, it's been so rewarding, but definitely isolating. Did you think a lot about the price that has been paid for being a first and an only?
Yeah, I think that's been the biggest thing that I've been left with. You just talked about being unsafe. We interview a woman named Nataki Garrett, who's the first ever Black woman artistic director at the Oregon Shakespeare Festival. And her position became so unsafe. She received so many threats and so much anger that her board of directors had to hire a security detail for her to direct theater, which is like such a wild thing to consider, that for so many folks, their professional ambitions required this level of unsafety, this level of risk. And in the episode, spoiler alert, she ends up resigning on camera.
Yep.
You know, and I think what I was left with after talking with her and seeing her resign and having these conversations is it worth it? Like, is it worth it? And I think that's going to be something to think about.
I think a lot of people have decided to make a business or a space that works for them in a healthy way. I know certainly that's what my husband is doing. It's like the corporate culture
Yes.
could not have one more microaggression. He could not have one more racial threat.
I've reached my threshold. That's it.
I'm out.
Yeah,
and I
good for
support him in that.
Yeah.
Like, create your own thing.
Yeah. Which is not easy.
Which is so hard,
it's so hard.
because we also don't have the contacts and the connections, but it's healthier.
Yeah, good for him.
It's healthier. So I want to
Shout out to
talk
your
about
husband.
another, right? Shout out to Leo. I'm always shouting out that man. He's a good one. I want to talk about Black maternal health. It is a really huge and scary topic, and it's one that hits you on a personal level. So what was your experience like having your beautiful boy? I have to say, that episode at the end when it's just you, your husband, and your son, I just got choked up. Like, it's just a beautiful thing to see.
Yeah.
You've had a personal experience, though, that has
Yeah.
not been great.
Yeah, the episode was definitely inspired by a personal experience. As I mentioned, I was pregnant in 2020. And while I was pregnant, I had some complications and ended up having to be hospitalized and had to see the OB on call in that particular hospital. And when she examined me, she refused to answer my questions, didn't listen to me, berated my midwife in front of me, and then proceeded to conduct a penetrative exam without asking for consent, explaining to me what she was about to do, anything. It was really traumatic and really scary, and it wasn't until many weeks, maybe even months later, that I realized that this was part of what I'd seen described as the Black maternal health crisis. This way that we get dehumanized, this way that the hospital system can treat so many folks, and the results of that, and what that can lead to, like higher intervention methods, higher mortality rates. And so, you know, I wanted to create an episode that examined the standard of care necessary for Black birthing people to feel safe. So we talk to OBs, midwives, doulas. We visit the Toronto Birth Centre, which is an incredible space, trying to imagine what a birthing experience can be like. We speak to so many birthing folks about what they want and how they've advocated for themselves, how they've pushed for themselves. And then while we were editing the episode, I found out I was pregnant again. And then I miscarried, and in that miscarriage also had, again, another horrific experience with the healthcare system. And I felt so shocked that I had another negative experience because I thought that I had all this information. I'd just done an entire episode. I was like, this time's gonna be so different. But the multitude of ways that this system has been made to be so inhuman for everyone, and then when you add race on top of that, it becomes even more urgent. So that episode feels to me, it's one of our show is very international. We travel around the world and we go to so many different countries, but that particular episode we stayed here because it feels like an urgent conversation to have here in a way that hasn't been happening. Ontario or Canada does not track race-based data, healthcare data in most of the country, except for one province, which is starting to do it. And that feels like a huge mistake because it means that we can't even prove that there's a problem here.
Yep.
So that is, it's become it's an episode that I hope will help to trigger a lot of conversation and hopefully some movement on that.
I hope that can move the dial,
Yeah.
and this will explode and become a bigger conversation. And I just feel like your voice has the power to make that happen. So I just want to say thank you for doing the deep dives. It's not easy to dive into work that includes trauma, but you've been doing it, and For the Culture is for all of us. So thank you, Amanda Parris.
Thank you.
We so appreciate you.
Thank you.
You can catch the show on CBC, of course. CBC Gem.
CBC Gem,
CBC Gem.